There's a certain kind of disaster movie where the Earth is about to be destroyed. We know it's coming. There's nothing we can do about it. And in movies like When Worlds Collide or Deep Impact, you're left with the protagonist simply standing on the shore, watching this 700,000-foot wave coming in to destroy everything that we've ever known. And every single one of those actors in every single one of those movies is wearing the same expression that every American is wearing today. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott. And today we're going to talk about the 2016 election in relation to SMOD, which, as many of you know, is the sweet meteor of death. It's a writing candidate for many of us. We're kind of hoping that the sweet meteor of death will come along, let's say, in the last week of October and just put us all out of our misery. Gentlemen, I have to tell you, with the exception of people that are actually working on campaigns, I don't know a single American on the Republican side, the Democratic side, on any side. I don't know anybody who's commenting on this overseas. I don't know anybody who is not saying that this is the most ridiculous looming catastrophe in the history of the United States. You have a man who cannot keep his mouth under control, and you have a woman who cannot keep her hands out of other people's pockets, and they may be the two most unpopular candidates in history, and that's what we get. And 320 million of the freest, most prosperous, most successful people in the world are marching down this little sluice as if to an abattoir, and there seems to be nothing that we can do about it. So that's what I would like to talk about. Let's start with you, Steve. There is a sense of inevitability, of unfocused dread, of disgust, revulsion, of every manner of negative, fatalistic, helpless feelings towards this election. And all of this is so completely un-American. What is going on here? I think, are they fluoridating the water?
Yeah, they're purifying our precious bodily fluids.
Feels that way.
Oh man, yeah, it's bad guano, all right. This made me think of something that kind of ticked in my memory a while ago. There's been a common theme in American speculative fiction. I mean specifically American speculative fiction, going back at least as far as Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, and all the way through John Ringo's book, I want to say The Last Centurion is what it's called. And in these books, and even in our zombie TV shows and movies now, there's this common theme that we've lost our way as a nation, and we get it back. We get back our essential Americanness by some sort of purging, cleansing fire. Mm-hmm. It's all very Puritan. In Atlas Shrugged, you've got the whole country collapses economically. The lights go out. New York, California is seceding from the Union, and it's chaos and all the rest. But at the end, one man stands up and says, "I'm going back to the world," and John Galt's going to fix it. And in John Ringo's, I think it's called The Last Centurion. It's a really fun read. Global cooling hits just as we're going through all this hell in the Middle East, and Hillary Clinton is president, and she's medicated through the crisis because she doesn't know how to handle it. She falls back on all these liberal tropes that make the crisis worse instead of better. And I think there's an infectious disease going on, just all this cleansing, purifying fire. And in the end, the sensible Americans are left, about 2/3 of the population, and rebuild the country back to its truer roots. Now, I'm not saying we're going through a cleansing fire right now, but is it me or is it a little warm in here?
Scott, that's actually an interesting take on this that I'd like to develop a little further with you. There is, as I say, a sense of unfocused dread and especially inevitability. There's just a sense that this is going to be a catastrophe one way or another, and there's just nothing we can do about it. And I look for periods like this in history. I find very few of them. But do you think that what we're actually seeing here with this election is a vague sense that the world is fundamentally changing, and I mean changing in the biggest possible way? The industrial era of full-time employment and 30, 40, 50 years with a company and a gold watch, those days are not coming back, and we don't know what's on the other side. But this feels like the end of everything, and certainly the American trend line is down. Do you think it's down permanently, or do you think this is the dip before the big recovery?
Well, my favorite movie that starts with the line, "The world is changing," ends
Yeah, mine too.
ends with a little hobbit somehow changing the world. And so, that kind of thing gives me hope. But you hear it in the anthems of this age. We are the new Americana, raised on Biggie and Nirvana, high on legal marijuana. We are the new Americana. I mean, I mentioned in our production meeting yesterday, I really think that we are seeing the coming of age of the generations that were nurtured and suckled, so to speak, on punk rock and Nirvana. And we're going into the emo election. America, Lady Liberty is cutting herself. There's a cry for attention. There's a cry for something that we can't quite enunciate, especially among the younger generation. And the older generation doesn't know how to connect and say, hey, here's what you're feeling. I get why you're feeling this way. Here's what I've learned through painful experience. Maybe together we can forge a better future, that kind of thing. Instead, we're driving each other. Being driven apart from each other. And I think that just because of the way cycles of life go, I actually have hope, and perhaps we need to hit bottom. Perhaps we need to elect one of these people. And I really
we're going to.
I don't think it matters really which one. But at some point where you hit bottom and you go, you know what? I am, my life is a mess and I've been powerless to change it. I acknowledge that there's a higher power and I'm going to take it one day at a time, but I'm committed to change.
It's a really optimistic way of looking at it, and I've kind of come to this conclusion myself. For the last year, in fact, for the last 8 years, but really for certainly for the last 4 or 5, there's just been this unfocused sense of dread. I would find myself saying things like, it's a free country. Well, at least it used to be. And we're the number one military in the world, or at least we used to be. Or we're the number one economy in the world, or at least we used to be. And this constant qualification of a time that was just a few years ago where things just were so much better. I don't think anybody who studies history, especially with the race riots and everything else, doesn't get the sense that something very bad is happening to America, and that the trend lines are down, and that nobody particularly likes it, and that this election represents all of it. It's not the same feeling as the Titanic. The Titanic pretty much woke up a bunch of people. They had 20, 30 seconds of warning. This is kind of like us spotting the iceberg 40 miles away. And then for the next 2.5 hours, steaming straight ahead, running right into it, and then having the ship goes down. It's very difficult to find a time like this in history, except for maybe that kind of unfocused dread of the 30s, where everybody knew that this was not over, that World War I had left the world in depression and destruction, and something worse was going to come before things get better. But look, I think that's exactly what's going on. I think the good news is that we are moving into an era which is unknown to us, but certainly with the era of the information age, things are decentralized, things are more local, they're much more connected, they're much more temporary. Things come together, they fall apart, they just come out of the soup, they form self-building little units, and back they go. All of these things actually work for us. They're all the kind of things that we like. They're about individuality, they're about freedom, they're about lack of central control, they're about lack of taxation, they're about lack of structure, they're a lack of being told what to do, because no one can tell what 300 million Americans are going to do when they can do just about everything on their own. So I suspect that this election, I hope this doesn't offend you, Scott, or anybody else out there, I suspect that this election in 2016 is going to be John the Baptist election. I think it's going to be the John the Baptist election that is going to show us that the election after this election is going to be the one where the American people simply say, all right, we've been dependent on government for everything for too long. It's time to get back to our absolute essence. There's going to be some pain involved, and the more pain that's involved, as Scott pointed out in his previous segment, the tougher it's going to be, the better we're going to remember it when it's all over. It's funny how that works, but it absolutely seems to be true. The sweet meteor of death is not going to save us from all of this, and I'm glad, because the sweet meteor of death means the end of everything. This just means the end of a political system that needs to be, if not completely overhauled, then simply rebuilt, redesigned, using the principles that we know already work. That means it's going to be up to us telling stories, the stories of freedom and what works and what doesn't. And that's why we're so grateful to all of you out there in our audience, and especially to our paying members at BillWhittle.com, who allow us to plant this seed of something, some remnant that's going to survive this catastrophe and lead us into a world that was much better than the one that began. You know, those people who fought the revolution must have thought, we love our king, we love our country of Great Britain, and now we have to watch all of it be destroyed. And what is on the other end of that? Landing on the moon's on the other side of that. That's what's on the other side of that. Be of good cheer. That's an American thing to do. Don't let these bastards get you down. We're going to find a way to get through this, and if we have to depend on each other, then that's probably the way it should have been all along. For Steve Green, Scott Ott, and the rest of us here at BillWhittle.com, thanks again for your membership. Thanks again for your courage. Thanks again for your patriotism. Thanks for your vision. And we will be here one way or another, no matter what happens in that first week in November.